Hey guys, welcome to another wonderful tutorial of me explaining to you the wonderful works of graphics. Now today we'll be covering some of the basics. For those of you who are just getting into Photoshop, getting into graphic design, I hope that you're going to tune into this channel and I hope that you learn something. So I want to send out a special shout out to all my students who are out there who learn graphics from me. Really love that you guys were with me and everything. And this being my first tutorial officially, kind of want to say hey to you who are just watching. So we're going to cover the basics of Photoshop and we're going to look into how to navigate around the interface, use the tools. We're going to break these videos down into really small parts so that you don't have to be overwhelmed by one entire video being like an hour or so long. Alright, so I hope you're going to enjoy this. So as we get into it, just look at an example of my background right here. This is my finger. Now this is an example of something you can do in Photoshop using a particular image and choosing the right text, the right font, the right size, and you get a nice looking effect right here. So it says, I choose to smile because my hope is in God. So yeah, I'm a Christian, not ashamed of it, and hopefully one day, if you're not already, you will be one too. And if you are, make sure you live in the life. Alright, so let's open up Photoshop. So here we are in Photoshop. This is where the interface go. Yeah. Alright, so if you look over here on the left side, we have our menu, right? Typical menu of pretty much most of your programs. You got file, edit, image, layer, select, filter, analysis, 3D, view, window, help. Alright. So you also have some top menus up here such as bridge and mini bridge, as well as some of the view extras. You can see your guides, grids, rulers, and also your viewing, as well as changing the arrangement of your documents. Now Photoshop offers you a huge amount of filters, huge amount of effects that you can do. You can combine multiple types of filters, multiple types of adjustments to create the desired effect that you want. Now look at Photoshop here. On the left side is where you typically have your tool set when you just open it, and you can always expand by clicking on these little arrows here. Now in the later version of the interface, buttons might look slightly different, slightly darker maybe, and the interface might be slightly darker, but you can always go into preferences and see how everything works. Now on the right side you have a few panels that you get in your essentials list, right? Some of the essential stuff that you'll be using, such as your color, your swatches, your styles, adjustments, masks, etc. Some of these might not be showing up right now. That's because we don't even have a document open. So let's get into the basics of it, creating a new document. Alright, to create a new document in Photoshop, you simply hit the file button and press new, or you can press Ctrl N. Now it's very important that you learn the shortcuts, the reason being because shortcuts actually allow you to kind of work a lot faster. And in the business of graphic design, they say time is money, especially if you're charging per hour. You don't want to be charging the client for clicking and opening the document. That doesn't make any sense. Alright, so new. Now when you start a new document, you can always give your document a name. We can probably call this one first Photoshop document. Right. Now in some cases you may have your preset as custom, and I'm going to tell you why mine is custom. Custom because I set it up this way. It has my own custom settings. Now you sometimes you have default Photoshop size, especially if you're a first time user of Photoshop. That typically is the default one that you get, and that tells you the width in centimeters here, units. You can always change the height as well, and even on the right side you can change the unit of measurement. You change the pixels, it's going to adjust accordingly. With centimeters, well, we can see how that works out. You have different measurements: inches, millimeters, points, picas, columns. It all depends on what you want to do. Now let's say I want to just create a document. That's my desktop size. I'm going to go through this a little bit. So my desktop resolution is 1366, and not inches, pixels by 768. Alright, now resolution, it all depends on device. When you're dealing with pixels, for this particular one it says pixels per inch or pixels per centimeter, depending. Now by default I'm going to use pixels per inch because that's what I'm more familiar with. Now your resolution tells you exactly how much, in this particular case, pixels per inch. Now when you're looking at pixels per inch, you want to say about 72 pixels per each literal inch. That's ruler inch, the standard unit. Now when it comes to resolution, you want to stick with, especially when printing, it's usually minimum 300 pixels per inch. That's a good printing resolution quality. So especially when you're considering printing, you want to consider having great looking resolution so that you don't have some choppy looking bits or some pixelated parts of the image. And having a high resolution, well, will naturally increase the size of the document, but at least at the end of the day, you will have a great looking document to work with. Now, color mode. You have RGB color. You also have bitmap grayscale, CMYK, and lab color. I'm going to explain two of them, or three of them rather. The RGB color typically is dependent on your monitor. RGB, red, green, blue. Now typically monitors tend to be red, green, and blue. Right? So some monitors might be more red than others. It all depends on the maker and the model and the brand, or even the OS. Sometimes you have a Mac type RGB versus a Adobe RGB versus some other RGB. And we also have the color mode. We also have bits on the right side, 8-bit, 16-bit, 32-bit. Now as you increase the bits, you get more colors, but I'm sticking with 8-bit because by default, when you stick with 8-bit, you actually have more access to all the features that Photoshop has to offer. Now the next color mode is CMYK. Now this is very important to look at. C meaning cyan, M magenta, Y yellow, and K for black. Yeah, don't ask me. I mean, if you're thinking Japanese, maybe it would make more sense because K is kage. Kage means shadow, you know. But CMYK has to do with how your printer operates. Typically when you're printing, and if you use a test page, you will usually see the colors cyan, magenta, yellow, and black. So you can see that this essentially, if you're working with printing documents, it will give you a more accurate color scheme than if you were to go with your RGB. Now the grayscale one. Grayscale pretty much gives you a grayscale image, an image that does black to white and any shade of gray in between. Alright, so the next part of it now is your background contents. Your background contents can be white, right? You can set to be white by default. So when you create a new document, you get a white canvas. And also you can check your background color to work with this background color here. We're going to get into those, foreground / background color. All depends on what your background color is. And next one, you can even make it transparent. So those of you who like working with transparent images, you know, you're going to enjoy that part. But it's not to say that you can't hide those background colors, as you will see in our later tutorials. Now we have different color profiles which we really don't need to go into, and we also have pixel aspect ratio. You don't really need to trouble this unless you're doing something like video editing, which they give you a series of options here. Now when it comes to designing, you're going to come across a whole bunch of stuff, a whole bunch of documents with different standards, different sizes. Now one of the things you don't want is that every time a client comes to you, say for instance making a business card, and typically the US size business card is about 3.5 inches by 2 inches, all depending on orientation. So you don't want a case where every time you're making a business card you have to be what size the business card again. The cool thing is that you can actually create custom presets. So the first thing is first, mine is already at custom. If I were creating, and forgive me for changing my settings a bit, if you for instance were creating a business card, and let's set this to inches, 3.5 by 2 inches, and I'm going to stick my resolution at 300 because let's say I was going to print it. That's good. Now I'm going to change my color mode. Since I'm intending to print it, I guess the most likely thing or color mode I could use is CMYK color. I can set my background transparent or white or background color, whichever one. I'm going to set to white, and all I'm going to do is save my preset, and you can see you have a preset name which you can change. You can call it business card, probably in brackets US size. There's different sizes. Europeans have different sizes, Japanese have different sizes. So it's good to know the sizes depending on which part of the world you're working. So if I press OK, what's going to happen? In my presets, I have my business card US size. See? I mean, I previously had a business card template here, and that works. But if in the case I wanted to erase one of them, I simply click on the preset, choose delete preset, and make sure you read these little dialog boxes that pop up. So are you sure you want to delete business card? This action cannot be undone. Yes. It's good to read them because some of the most common things that happen, you might wonder how come this isn't working when really and truly you're not reading the dialog boxes. Alright, so let me go back to my original settings, and I have one for my desktop resolution already, and I can press OK. So I'm going to press OK here, and what I get is my document. Now let's just a little bit of explanation here, especially particularly about the view. Right now, if I look down here, I have 66.67%. That tells me that my workspace here, right, is only being viewed at that percentage. I can always come in here and type it in, probably 70%. Now if you want it to kind of fit in properly, you have shortcuts for that. You can press Control and 0 to get it to fit in your window. So automatically adjust that percentage there. Alright. Now in the case that, for instance, you had created a document, and sometimes the case is that when you're starting you kind of get the units mixed up. You can always check your image, and you can change your image size. Just make sure it says pixels rather than inches, because if you're working with 1366 inches, working with a document can be very slow, because the larger the size, the more the processing is going to take. So if everything is good and ready, you can press OK. Right? And yeah, that's it. So over here on the left side, you have your tools, as I had mentioned earlier, and you have your panels. Now, one of the things to note, I mean, as you're going to be doing tutorials and you're going to be looking at different documents and ways to do stuff, you want to keep in mind that if you can't find a panel that is being displayed somewhere, in probably a tutorial or something, you can always go to Window and show up those panels, right? Different workspaces as well. Now, I hadn't explained workspaces earlier. At the top part, we have different workspaces, right? Right now, I'm using Essentials workspace, but the different workspaces kind of organize your layout in such a way that it might work towards a particular goal that you set. For instance, typography is pretty much arrangement of type or text to create a specific design or appeal. Now, if we look at typography here, what's going to happen is that some of my my panels have changed, right? They're going to be panels that are more leaning towards text, such as our character and our paragraph right there, right? So character will give me some stuff here about the paragraph and the character right here, left adjustments and justifying and all those things, right? And also your color swatches is something you can definitely consider when it is that you're using oh, look at me, I'm flying across the screen. Anyway, so that's some of the things. Interface is completely customizable, well, relatively completely customizable. You could always move things around. If you don't like, for instance, these things on the right side, you can always drag them out. If you want your tool set on the right side instead, you can always pull it over and you can get your tools on that side instead. All depends on what you want to do. You can even arrange the way these are organized. If you don't want these three to be stacked together, you can always pull out one by itself and put in its own little panel for itself, right? It's all customizable. You can always stick it back over here. If you want it over there, you can do that. See, Photoshop is really for the user. I mean, they have a great interface here, a great design. Kudos to the developers, right? But if in the case that you kind of just did this random stuff, and maybe you like the way this looks, you can always, create a new workspace and maybe save it the way you want to save. I'll call this mixed weird. And I save that. You see mixed weird pops up right there because that's the new workspace. Now, If in the case I don't particularly like my workspace, I mean, you could always switch back to an original one and maybe just right click and delete this one. It's okay. But if you look at typography, typography kind of has the same old that we had a while ago. And we kind of want to just fix that. So just right click on typography and just choose to reset typography. So these are the essentials of your workspace. I mean, for the tools, they're categorized, but we're going to go through the tools in our next video. So look out for that, and this is where we end, guys. And remember, smile, you're alive, right? God's good. So take care, enjoy graphics, and don't get bored. And if you get bored, just be inspired to do something else. All right? I don't mean inspired to do something else besides graphics. I mean, so amazing. All right, guys, take care. Good night or day, depending on what time you're watching the video.